Welcome on into the Week 6 quarterback tight end rankings. We got Baltimore and Buffalo Bills on bye this week, so obviously their players will not be getting ranked here. And let's start off with no quarterback injuries. Of course, there is Mac Jones, Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy might be coming back. That would be the one kind of injury update that I can think of off the top of my head for the quarterbacks. Interesting usage situations. This comes from the J.J. Zachariason information dump. He puts that out onto the social media networks every Monday morning. So it's good stuff. I go through it. I parse out the good stuff, the bad stuff, might add some context to it for you as well. Jackson Dart is averaging 55.7 rushing yards per game. The simple thing about that is that is an elite number. That turns a 12-point game into 17.5 or so points. So it's not that hard for quarterbacks to get up to that 12 points, and then everything above that starts to become a pretty decent game. Bryce Young did have a good fantasy week, but he was the first quarterback to score fewer than 24 fantasy points against the Dallas Cowboys, so that is why he was a love of mine last week. Or no, I just had him ranked really high. There were several of those guys, like Zay Jones was kind of a fade of mine, but I just had him ranked low. That worked out better than my loves and my fades last week. Bryce Young, not a love of mine, but I did get to tell a few people or suggest him to several people ultimately. I don't know how many ended up using him, but hopefully it worked out for you. But also just, that is our reminder that, Bryce Young, he's not very great. He's done the least good out of everybody against Dallas so far. And Sam Darnold is averaging 19.2 fantasy points per game. That's pretty darn good for a quarterback. Well, that's pretty darn good, You like that. That's a good average. All right, my loves and my fades last week. I loved Justin Herbert. Nah. And I faded Jackson Dart. Yikes. It didn't help that Jalen Carter went out. That was a big piece to me, actually, because that opened up the middle of the field, and you saw that, the first rushing touchdown, Jackson Dart takes it right up the middle. If Jalen Carter's there on that play, I don't think that, that's so wide open for him to be able to get through. But, and then also Quinyon Mitchell went out fairly early on in that game, and I think that opened up, things in the receiving game as well. Nonetheless, great game. I thought those linebackers would be able to keep him in check, quarterback spy style, and they did quarterback spy, but Jackson Dart just blew right past him every time that he ran. So I won't say every time, but definitely on that touchdown play, broke some ankles there of that very good linebacker unit, and he's got a very similar matchup for the same reasons. I'm still concerned about him this week as well, and we'll see how he does this time in this test. But look at that in a good way or a bad way. He just came through it last week, so no reason to think he might not be able to do it again. So I do think he ends up being a little bit higher in the rankings, though I'm still nervous about him this week. Also, love the rushing upside, and it just seems like nobody can stop him. And he's thrown to nobody. Very impressive how well he's done with how little he has. So, Patrick Mahomes is my quarterback one on the week. This is my first tier. These are the guys, they're pretty easy to just start this week for one reason or another. And you can see the implied point totals are all good for all of these guys, so that helps it make it a little bit easier too. Vegas is on board. And for almost all of them, they've at least been pretty darn good quarterbacks. So, this week, as long as you've got any of these guys, it's kind of easy for you to just put a quarterback in. Otherwise, it starts to get pretty challenging, and decisions need to be made. So, Patrick Mahomes, Jaden Daniels, Dak Prescott all the way up at quarterback 3 this week against Washington. I think Drake May has an argument to be up there, as well as Caleb Williams going against New Orleans. As well, of course, Jalen Hurts always has an argument to be in the top 3, but he's going up against Minnesota this week. I am going to fade Jalen Hurts. I really think that this isn't a pretty matchup for him. He struggles against pressure. I don't like the matchup at all. And that offense, where they're at as a team, it just hasn't been nice. So I'm nervous about it. Of course, that still means he probably gets 18 plus fantasy points or something at least. So he's still ranked pretty high, but don't be shocked if it's a bad game. It could be. And then I'm loving Jared Goff this week, but he brings you almost no rushing upside. Going up against Tampa Bay, highest over-under of the week. You love that. And I'm not afraid of Tampa Bay's secondary or anything. So I think Jared Goff should, at the very least, fall amongst average and not hurt you this week. Jordan Love, Baker Mayfield, Justin Herbert, Bo Nix going up against the New York Giants. Once again, I don't love it. I might end up moving him behind these two because technically it's not like a bad matchup, but like Giants have every team that they've played, they've made it a game for the most part, at least up until at some point in the game. They have not been an easy beat. So I think I'm going to go that route with how Bo Nix has been playing. It's just there's no guarantee. Like I don't like this spread here. So there we go. Daniel Jones, quarterback 11 out. Matt Stafford 12, and Bo Nix. I might have to flip these two back again too because there's no. I want to call him Cooper Kupp. There's no Puka Nacua there, so that's also risky. Or maybe I just need to put these guys. I don't know. Maybe we still give Bo Nix a chance on that one. But we'll keep Daniel Jones up there instead. So that's going to bring us on to this next tier, and it's Jackson Dart, it's Justin Fields. You get the theme. So Carolina, Denver, neither one of them have been good quarterback matchups. Same reasons I was concerned about Jackson Dart against Denver. I'm similarly concerned about him this week. Maybe they'll do a better job against him. Maybe they won't. But you can see Vegas obviously doesn't expect Jackson Dart to be sitting there going off, but that rushing upside definitely goes a long ways. And then, same story for Justin Fields. Like, he's not even going to have Garrett Wilson, I don't think, this week. Probably not. That's kind of where I'm at right now. So, I'm fading the two of them. I usually just do one fade, one love, but this week's going to be a little unique. Let's move on to this next tier, which is a pretty big tier with a lot of, if you're picking from this group, it's tough. It's tough. So I got Brock Purdy or Mac Jones. Either way, going up against Atlanta, it's been a rough matchup, and it's not like that San Francisco offensive line is just going to automatically stuff this Atlanta pass rush that's been quite good throughout most of the year now. And so I do have some concerns about the upside for them at the very least, whichever one of them starts. So I would go for the upside of these guys probably over either of these two or anybody else in this tier, obviously. C.J. Stroud, Aaron Jones, Sam Darnold, Trevor Lawrence, Bryce Young, Michael Penix Jr., Jacoby Brissett, Carson Wentz, Spencer Rattler, Dylan Gabriel, making it into the end of this tier. So you could definitely feel some different vibes as we go through. And a couple of surprises here. Aaron Rodgers all the way up here at quarterback 18, but you know why that is? There's a lot of bad matchups for some of the guys who were borderline good quarterbacks. Sam Darnold going up against Houston, horrible matchup. Trevor Lawrence against the Rams isn't actually too horrible, but Bryce Young going up against the New York Jets, So, the big one here that's like a surprise would be Aaron Rodgers over Sam Darnold. I'm going to take the better matchup here. You could easily flip the two, and if you have Sam Darnold, I'm not going to recommend you drop him, that's for sure, much less for Aaron Rodgers. But I'm going to love Aaron Rodgers this week against Cincinnati, coming off of a solid week last week. I think that Pittsburgh, I think they'll be able to move against Cincinnati here, and that should give them some scoring opportunities, which is exactly what Vegas thinks, more scoring opportunities. And that kind of was my tiebreaker here between these two, is Vegas said, yeah, let's ride for Aaron Rodgers. So I'm going for it. But very, very close in the rankings. And then I'm also going to love Carson Wentz this week for all the reasons that I've been talking about throughout these rankings videos so far, and the running backs, wide receivers videos. I think I've talked about this a little bit for every position so far. So Philadelphia not going to have Quinyon Mitchell, that secondary, those cornerbacks most notably of that secondary. Not great depth there, and their CB2's already been struggling anyways, even with Quinyon Mitchell on the field. So I think that Minnesota might be able to kind of slice and dice this up a little bit. And if it's J.J. McCarthy playing this week, then it's J.J. McCarthy. I'm not going to give him a love tag, though. Haven't seen enough from him for that. I would move him probably back ahead of Tua, maybe keep him ahead of Tua, maybe, if he comes back. Then that does bring us to the Tua, Geno, Joe Flacco tier. Tua playing against Cleveland, yuck, don't like it. It's not the end of the world, so maybe he could be okay. It's Geno Smith. It's not the end of the world, so maybe he could be okay. But I did feel just a slightly more comfortable with some of these other guys at the bottom of the tier. And then Joe Flacco going up against Pittsburgh there, so not the end of the world either. And Cam Ward is in a tier of his own. That's the only guy this week that I am, it's been bad this year, so he's earned his own tier. That's going to bring us on to the tight end rankings. And before we get on to the tight end rankings, we will start off with the injuries. We got Brock Bowers. He's been considered week to week. He is not expected to be coming back this week, so I will not be ranking him this week. Mike Gesicki had a pectoral injury. Sounds like he might miss time. I don't know. It's not that big of a deal anyways for fantasy purposes, but he, maybe Noah Fant, if you want to take a crazy shot for it, you could always try something like that. David Njoku also had a knee injury this last week. I don't know how likely it is he misses time or not, but currently not ranking him. Few interesting usage things from the JJ Zachariason info dump. Darren Waller, 10% target share this last week. I was already talking about how his targets have not been that great. He was not getting a high target share. That was like the one concern, the one difference from Jonnu Smith last year too. But his route share did spike once again, so he's gone from 40% to 70% up to 80%, so we're probably finding his home base there anywhere from like 75 to 85% would be, I guess, what we're going to probably be expecting here for Darren Waller in terms of that number, which is good enough. Isaiah Likely of the Baltimore Ravens ran 5 more routes than Mark Andrews. That's the first time that's happened this season. So, we'll see how that ends up looking. Las Vegas, Michael Mayer had 32% target share with no Brock Bowers in there, so that was nice. And I'm just realizing I forgot to add him into the rankings, so let's fit him in here somewhere. And if I don't end up fitting him in, check the comments. Hopefully I remembered to put him in there. Otherwise, by the time we get to Sunday morning, I'll for sure have put him into my rankings at that point. Cade Otton ran the most routes out of any player on the Tampa Bay offense, and he saw a 26% target share to go along with that. And Mecca Buka's out now too, so expect that to potentially continue. And then Juwan Johnson dropped from his 90%, not target share, route participation rates that he had been at down to approximately 70%. So we are seeing the addition of, most notably, why do I forget his name every single time? I've known his name so well for the last couple of years, but not Taysom Hill, the other tight end that came back. We are seeing that impact Juwan Johnson's ability to get on the field, which then impacts his opportunities, and it hasn't been good lately. My last week, I loved Mason Taylor, and then Noah Fant, who did get like 4 targets, so he was involved, and the other tight end there too in Cincinnati ended up getting a touchdown, and that's why I liked the Cincinnati tight end as a love, but Noah Fant did not come through, and I loved Mason Taylor, but let's be very clear, I had him lower in my rankings than the average ranker did, the ECR for Mason Taylor, and I ended up being able to not suggest him for a lot of people and just mention that I love him, but that it was more of a full PPR play. And then he only gets 1 target anyways, so that's pretty. Nobody, you can't predict that poor of an offensive game plan. Just terrible. I faded Theo Johnson, that did end up coming through. He did not do anything for you in fantasy of note. He was probably better than Mason Taylor, though. So that is going to bring us on to my Week 7 tight end rankings. Over here on the left, this fantasy points column, that's what this is, FPS, fantasy points, is on a scale of 0 through 36, and the higher the score, the better, and this is an average fantasy points per week number, but there is a twist of consistency and some cherry picking that does go along for guys that might get injured or something early on in the game. I don't include those in the data set because this is supposed to be a predictive number at this point in the season, at least at the end of the year. We'll keep that stuff in for how they performed over the season, but right now it's supposed to help us looking forward. How well have they done so far? And a game where a guy gets injured is not representative of what we should expect from them in a game where they're healthy. So that's the difference there. Then we got our average targets per game, and any games that are removed for fantasy points, it should match up for the targets games that are removed as well. And we got our Vegas spread and the implied point total as well, just to help guide us along as we make our rankings and to help you when you're looking at these maybe make a couple of decisions on your own between some players, have that information available. once again, you can find this stuff up on the website, www.theff4ch.com. There's links in the description. I don't remember if I went through this at the beginning of the video or not, so we'll cap it right now. So there's links in the description to those rankings, and the rankings are always updated throughout the week. And don't forget, on Thursday evenings, 1.5 hours prior to kickoff, I am available. I think we have another overseas game, so probably Saturday evening. I am also available. We try to keep those sessions shorter, but they seem to be really popular for your start-sit question Saturday evening, and then 3 hours prior to kickoff on Sunday mornings, also available here, live on YouTube, streaming each of those Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. Now, we got them revealed. You've seen them. We got Trey McBride in at tight end at number 1 going up against Green Bay. Yay. Jake Ferguson, George Kittle. I am currently ranking George Kittle as if he's going to play. It's far from a guarantee that he plays this week, and it is not a really good matchup against Atlanta, but I would still play him this highly. Tyler Warren right behind that, obviously a good guy, but it's a good play, but also not a great matchup against the Chargers. And Sam Laporta up against Tampa Bay. That is a good matchup, but he's a little flaky. So, but he still makes it into my first tier, and in my second tier, you're going to kick it off with Dallas Goedert, followed by Tucker Kraft, Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, Hunter Henry, Darren Waller, Harold Fannin Jr., and Cade Otton to wrap this tier up. Did I do loves and I'm sure I did some loves and fades here. Is there anything really? So Dallas Goedert actually was originally my love of the week, and then I did something a little bit differently. So I have a trio of loves, a little lower for you people who are hurting at tight end and need to try something out, and there's the pickings are slim for you. So I do like Goddard in this matchup because the game plan against Minnesota should be to get that ball out quickly, at least early on in the game, to set some sort of pace with that. And the guy out of A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert that you can do that to most easily, and we saw this enough last week too, where he got a lot of targets, would be Dallas Goedert. So could be another game where Dallas Goedert gets a fair amount of targets is the main thing there. And you might think I'm a little low on Tucker Kraft, but I mean, man's living on 4.4 average targets per game. It's not a lot, but going up against Arizona, so, the touchdown opportunity is definitely a real, as it is always for this Green Bay offense, really. Travis Kelce, a little bit nervous with the Rashee Rice addition, so that's why I might be a little low on him. But just in general, a near fade for me with Rashee Rice coming back, but I couldn't quite get there. Zach Ertz going up against Dallas, high over under, so we like the touchdown upside there. Hunter Henry in a good matchup, and that's why some of these guys are up ahead of Darren Waller when you combine the expectation of touchdown opportunities against Cleveland aren't high. Cleveland does well against tight ends, quite well, and the actual amount of opportunities that Darren Waller's been getting, so quite boom or bust. That floor is not pretty for him currently with the targets that he's been getting, so especially in, once again, a bad matchup and in a low implied point total there. Harold Fannin Jr. against Miami. If there is no David Njoku, seems like a pretty solid play. Miami's been a good matchup for tight ends, and Cade Otton going up against Detroit. Nice high over-under there. Could be might be the leading receiver for Tampa Bay next week. So, him or Cade Otton. So, that's, him or Cade Otton. Him or the running back. Oh my God. It's all skipped my mind. It doesn't matter. That's in the running backs video. Kyle Pitts, Mason Taylor, Evan Ingram just sneaking in their own little tier here of guys who you could play. Nothing wrong with playing any of them. And that is where the fun begins with the final tier of guys who are usable. You could play them. And that tier kicks off at my tight end 17 with Dalton Schultz, followed by Chig Okonkwo, T.J. Hawkinson, Jonnu Smith, A.J. Barnett, Theo Johnson, Noah Fant, Juwan Johnson, Oronde Gadsden, Tyler Higbee, Taysom Hill. I don't mean to sit here and fade the tight end that goes up against Philadelphia every week, but it also tends to work every single week, and especially if J.J. McCarthy comes along, I don't have much confidence in T.J. Hawkinson to begin with, so, he ends up being a fade this week, got him all the way down at tight end 19. I even have Dalton Schultz and Chig Okonkwo, which if you know me, it's not like I love Chig, but like in terms of fantasy, it's not like I always sing his praises. But Seattle, New England, good tight end matchups. And when you look at, what they've done on the season, both of them have outperformed TJ Hawkinson on average. And when you look at the targets, the opportunities, they're also higher than TJ Hawkinson's. The implied point totals are close enough. And hey, the game scripts also are all positive, at least, for these teams to continue passing throughout the game. So, TJ Hawkinson slips down the rankings a little bit due to a couple of good matchups, and then Jonnu Smith, and them being in a bad matchup, and then Jonnu Smith also in a good matchup against Cincinnati, and a nice high implied point total. I think definitely Pittsburgh could once again rely on their tight ends a fair bit, and you just hope that Jonnu Smith is the tight end, if that does the best out of them for you. Then we got A.J. Barner, Theo Johnson. Not a good matchup again this week, but I'm not quite fading him either. Noah Fant, Juwan Johnson. It's been bad. Rondé Gadsden, a lot of targets last week. Decent enough, implied point total matchup. If QJ's out again, maybe he sees a decent amount of targets again. Tyler Higbee. Good matchup against Jacksonville. Taysom Hill. Maybe he rushes for a touchdown against Chicago. Could be possible. Really rather not start Pat Freiermuth, Colson Loveland, Cole Kmet, Elijah Royal, Will Dissly at this point, not even on a prayer. Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Dalton Kincaid, all on bye. Jake Tonges, I am not ranking currently because I do have George Kittle ranked, in which case, obviously, Tongas, however it's pronounced, you don't want to do that. And then David Njoku, Mike Gesicki, Brenton Strange, Brock Bowers, Jatavian Sanders, all not being ranked currently. Tommy Tremble also not being ranked, but no offense to him. If you want to start Tommy Tremble over someone, ask me that specific question in the comments. That is it, everybody. Thank you so very much for joining me for the quarterbacks and the tight ends. Once again, running backs, wide receivers videos, they're already out, so go check them out. Peace out. Love ya. Like the video, please. Bye-bye.